Have you ever seen a person become a stranger in their own home? Have you ever watched a soul break under the weight of a single, terrible moment? I want to tell you a story. A true story. The story is about a child everyone rejected, became the only one who could save them all. Tonight, you will hear the unforgettable story of Elena, a mother cast out, and her son Diego, born different, mocked by his people, yet destined to change the fate of an entire village. Welcome to Folktales Hub. Please, while you hear, hit the subscribe button and like. Listen closely, because this is not just a story. It is a memory, a warning, and a prayer, carried from a small forgotten village in the hills of Latin America. It is the story of a woman named Elena, and the boy who changed her life forever. The sun was barely rising the day Elena went into labor. The streets of the village of San Jacinto were still quiet, chickens scratching in the dust, dogs sleeping in the shade of clay walls. Elena's cries echoed through her tiny house, a sound of pain, yes, but also of hope. She was young, maybe 20 at most, and she had dreamed of this child. She dreamed of holding him in her arms, of kissing his forehead, of raising him to be strong and kind. But when the midwife lifted the newborn up to the light, the room fell silent. The baby's skin was brown like any other child in San Jacinto. But his eyes were blue. Not just blue, bright, piercing like the sky after rain. And right above his forehead, a streak of silver hair shone like a thread of moonlight. The midwife gasped. The neighbors who had gathered outside whispered, pressing against the thin wooden walls. "This is not natural," someone hissed. "This is a curse," another spat. Elena, still trembling with exhaustion, reached for her baby. But the midwife hesitated before placing him in her arms. "Elena," she whispered, almost afraid to say the words. "This is not a child like the others. This is something else." From that moment the village turned cold. Instead of congratulations, Elena received stares of suspicion. Instead of help, she received whispers behind her back. By sunset, when the child had barely drawn his first day's breath, San Jacinto had already decided. The boy was cursed. And Elena, his mother, was guilty of bringing him into the world. Now let me tell you something about villages. In places like San Jacinto, poverty and tradition are strong. People cling to old beliefs like lifelines. And anything strange, anything different, becomes dangerous. So when the village priest came to Elena's door, his face stern, his words sharp, she already knew what he had come to say. "Elena," he said, standing tall in his black robes, "this child is not a gift. He is a test. People fear him. They fear what he will bring. You must take him away." Elena's heart stopped. "Take him away. Father, he is only a baby, my baby. He has done nothing wrong." But the priest only shook his head. Sometimes innocence carries the greatest burden. And with that, the church, her last hope, turned its back on her. By the second day, the whispers had become open insults. When Elena carried her child through the plaza, people pulled away as though her very shadow carried sickness. Children pointed and laughed, cruel in their innocence. Mothers clutched their rosaries, muttering prayers under their breath. And then came Rosa. Rosa, the butcher's wife. A woman whose tongue was sharper than the knife she used to cut meat. She stepped into Elena's path, eyes blazing with hatred. "Take that thing out of here," she spat, pointing at the baby. "You shame us all by keeping it in this village. Do you want God's anger to fall on our crops, our children? You and your demon must leave." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded. Some looked away in shame but said nothing. And Elena stood frozen, clutching her child against her chest, tears burning her eyes. By the third day the decision was made. They would cast her out. It did not matter that Elena was one of their own. It did not matter that she had done nothing but love her son. Fear had spoken louder than compassion. At sunrise she was pushed from her home. Her belongings, just a blanket, a clay jug, and a small bag of maize, were thrown at her feet. The door slammed shut behind her, and she stood alone in the dust, her baby crying in her arms. Can you imagine that moment? A young mother, trembling, exhausted, holding her fragile child. And the very people she had grown up with, people she had shared food with, prayed beside, laughed with, now turning their backs as though she were a stranger. To walk. She did not know where to go, only that she could not stay. Down the narrow road that wound out of San Jacinto, her bare feet stumbled, her tears falling silently onto her child's face. The mountains stretched ahead, vast and indifferent. The sun was cruel, burning her skin. Every step was heavier than the last. And still the child cried. That thin, desperate wail, the sound of a life unwanted. But fate is strange. And sometimes when the world turns its back, one heart chooses differently. It was near the edge of the village that Raphael found her. Raphael the blacksmith. A man of few words. His hands always blackened with soot and iron. He was strong, yes, but more than that, he was kind, though he rarely showed it. He saw Elena collapsed by the roadside, her baby wrapped in the torn blanket. And though the whispers had reached his ears too, he did not see a demon. He saw a mother, broken and desperate. "Elena," he said quietly, crouching beside her. "You cannot stay out here. Come with me." She shook her head, choking on her tears. "They don't want me. They don't want him. If I go back, they will." "You will not go back," Raphael interrupted, his voice steady as iron. "You will come to my home. Let them talk. Let them spit. Words cannot kill. Hunger can. And your child needs more than words." And so Elena followed him to the small forge at the edge of San Jacinto, where the smoke rose each morning and the hammer rang like a heartbeat against metal. There, among the sparks and the fire, she and her son found shelter. The villagers gossiped. They said Raphael was a fool, that he had cursed himself by taking them in. But Raphael paid them no mind. He swung his hammer, he shaped his iron, and when night came, he sat by the fire with Elena and her child. Those first nights were hard. Elena wept silently as she nursed her son. She wondered if she had doomed him simply by giving him life. She wondered if maybe the whispers were right. But then she would look into his blue eyes, see the way they glistened like the open sky, and her heart would tighten with something stronger than fear. Love. Raw, unshakable love. And little by little, with Raphael's quiet strength beside her, Elena began to believe. Maybe this child was not a curse. Maybe, just maybe, he was something else. And that was only the beginning. Because the real storm had not yet come. The true test, of Elena, of Raphael, of the entire village, was still waiting just beyond the horizon. Now listen. It is one thing to survive rejection. It is another to raise a child in the shadow of it. Elena and Raphael lived on the edge of San Jacinto like exiles, close enough to hear the church bells each morning, but far enough that the villagers could pretend they did not exist. The forge was their shelter, the fire their guardian, the anvil their table. And at the center of it all, little Diego. Diego grew fast. By his first year he was walking, unsteady steps, falling, getting up again. By his second, he was laughing, a bright, clear laugh that seemed to cut through the bitterness of the village. And by his third, he was asking questions. Endless questions, curious about everything, as though the world itself was a book only he could read. But still those eyes. Those blue, piercing eyes that no one else in San Jacinto shared. And that silver streak of hair that glistened in the sunlight like a thread of lightning. The villagers never forgot. Children can be cruel, you know. One afternoon, Diego wandered near the plaza, chasing a wooden toy Raphael had carved for him. A group of boys saw him. They laughed, pointed, and began to chant. "Ghost boy! Ghost boy! Eyes like ice, hair like death." They threw pebbles, small but sharp. Diego, confused, did not fight back. He only stood there, clutching his toy, his lip trembling. Elena rushed to him, scooping him into her arms. Her eyes burned with tears, not just of pain but of fury. She wanted to shout at the boys, at their mothers, at the whole world. But what good would shouting do? So she carried him home, whispering, You are not a ghost, mi cielo. You are my son. You are my heart. But life is not softened by love alone. Hardship came swift, merciless. When Diego turned 5, a fever swept through the village. Children coughed, their skin burned with heat, their breaths shallow. Some recovered, others did not. And when Diego's forehead grew hot, when his small body shook with chills, Elena's world collapsed. She held him through the night, bathing his skin with cool water, begging him to stay awake. Please, Diego, don't leave me. Please, hijo, don't let go. Rafael worked without rest, riding to nearby farms, searching for herbs, medicines, anything that might help. But everywhere he went, doors slammed in his face. No, they told him. We won't give medicine for that boy. Let fate take him. Imagine that. To see a child suffer. And still choose cruelty. On the third night, Elena sat rocking her son in her lap. His breathing was shallow, his lips pale. She sang softly, an old lullaby her mother had once sung to her. And she prayed. For the first time in years she prayed. Not to the saints who had abandoned her, not to the priest who had condemned her, but to something higher, something beyond words. If you take him, she whispered through her tears, take me too. I cannot live without him. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled, her heart broke. But sometimes life clings to life. Diego opened his eyes, those impossible, sky-colored eyes. Mama, he whispered, weak but alive. Don't cry. I'm here. And just like that, the fever began to break. Slowly, painfully, but it broke. Elena wept, not from despair this time, but from a joy so sharp it almost hurt. Her boy would live. When Diego returned to the plaza weeks later, thinner but smiling, the villagers watched in silence. Some shook their heads, muttering that curses were hard to kill. But others felt something stir inside them. Perhaps it was shame. Perhaps it was doubt. Perhaps it was the beginning of something they could not yet name. The turning point came not long after. It was market day, the plaza full of voices, smells, and colors. Elena went to buy maize, Rafael beside her, Diego trailing close, his hand in his mother's. And then it happened again. Rosa, the butcher's wife, the loudest tongue in San Jacinto, stepped into their path. Why do you bring him here? She snapped. Do you enjoy poisoning our streets with your demon child? Her voice was sharp enough to cut. The crowd turned. Faces tightened. Elena froze, her heart hammering. But before she could speak, Rafael stepped forward. He placed himself between Rosa and the boy. His voice was calm, but there was iron in it. Enough, he said. This child has done nothing to you. He is flesh and blood like any of us. He breathes the same air, bleeds the same red. Enough. Rosa's mouth twisted, ready to spit venom. But then, something unexpected happened. From the back of the crowd, an old man's voice rose. Rafael is right. It was Don Mateo, the oldest farmer in San Jacinto. His skin wrinkled by sun and years. His back bent but his eyes still sharp. He had seen more seasons than any of them, more droughts, more harvests, more deaths and births. He stepped forward, leaning on his cane. Fear has blinded us, he said. This boy is not a curse. He is a child. And a village that rejects its children. Rejects its own future. The plaza fell silent. Even Rosa lowered her eyes, though her lips still curled in anger. For the first time since his birth, Diego was defended. Not by his mother, not by Rafael, but by someone else. Someone the village respected. That night, Elena sat by the fire, Diego asleep in her lap. She looked at Rafael, at the steady strength in his shoulders, the quiet kindness in his eyes. And she whispered, almost to herself, maybe he was never meant to belong to them. Maybe he was meant to change them. Rafael said nothing. But the way his gaze softened on Diego, it said enough. Still change is slow. Though Don Mateo's words planted a seed, the soil of San Jacinto was hard. Suspicion still lingered. Whispers still followed Diego wherever he went. And yet, something had shifted. Where once there was only hate, now there was hesitation. Where once every door was closed, now one or two cracked open. The storm had not yet passed. But perhaps the first light of dawn was beginning to show. Child who would not break. A mother who would not let go. And a village that, for the first time, began to question the cruelty of its own heart. But the greatest test was still to come. For San Jacinto was about to face a trial that would scorch the land, starve the stomachs, and crush the spirit of its people. And in that trial, the boy they had once cast out would become their only hope. My friends, let me tell you, life in San Jacinto had always been hard. The soil was rocky, the sun was merciless, and the rains, the rains, came late more often than they came on time. But nothing had prepared the people for what was about to unfold. It began in silence. The skies cleared in the planting season and then stayed clear. Weeks passed. The earth cracked like old pottery. The maize shoots curled, their leaves turning from green to yellow to brittle brown. The riverbed thinned, then dried completely. Children fetched water from faraway springs, their small arms aching under the weight of clay jars. The animals suffered first. Chickens grew thin, cows gave little milk, and goats bleated from thirst. Then the people began to feel it too. Stomachs growled, tempers snapped. And slowly, the songs of San Jacinto, the laughter in the plaza, the chatter at the market, fell into silence. Elena and Raphael felt it keenly. Their small garden withered. The few beans they grew shriveled on the vine. But what worried Elena most was Diego. He was 10 now, still slight, still marked by those ocean-colored eyes and that streak of silver hair. But he was no longer the fragile child of before. He was strong, curious, and strangely serene. Sometimes she would wake in the night to find him sitting by the doorway, gazing up at the stars as if waiting for an answer from them. "Diego," she would whisper, "come back inside, it's cold." And he would nod, smile faintly, and return to bed. But she wondered, what did he see out there in the silence of the night? By midsummer, hunger was no longer a shadow. It was a guest in every home. The villagers grew restless. Arguments broke out in the plaza. Some blamed fate, others blamed the government. And a few, always the same few, pointed once again to Diego. "You see," Rosa hissed, her voice shrill in the square. "Ever since that boy was born, nothing has gone right. The skies themselves refuse us because of him." People muttered. Heads nodded. Desperation makes even the foolish sound wise. Elena heard it all. Her heart tightened, her hands shook with fury, but she said nothing. Not yet. One evening, the villagers gathered at the church, their faces hollow with despair. Father Miguel spoke of patience, of faith, of enduring trials. But his words rang thin against the sound of children crying with hunger. And then Don Mateo, frail but unyielding, stood and raised his cane. "Enough talk," he rasped. "If we have faith, let us show it. Let us pray as one. Not just for rain but for mercy. And let the boy join us." A murmur spread through the church. The boy. Diego, who sat quietly beside Elena, lifted his head. His strange eyes caught the candlelight. For a long moment no one breathed. And then, slowly, Don Mateo nodded toward him. "Yes, if we ask heaven to hear us, let the child they call cursed stand among us. For if he is a curse, let God reveal it. And if he is not..." His voice trailed off. But his meaning hung heavy in the air. That night, the entire village gathered in the plaza. Old women clutched rosaries, men held their hats in their hands, children leaned against their mothers' skirts. In the center stood Father Miguel, Don Mateo, and hesitant, uncertain Diego. Elena's heart raced. She wanted to grab her son, hold him close, shield him from the eyes that burned into him. But Diego, he did not tremble. He stepped forward, barefoot on the cracked earth, and raised his small hands to the sky. And then, in a voice clear and steady, he prayed. Señor del Cielo, he said, we are your children. Look at us. We are thirsty. We are afraid. But we are still here. If you made me different, then let me be different for a reason. Not for curse, but for blessing. His words carried through the silence like wind through dry leaves. Even Rosa lowered her head. The plaza grew still. Every eye lifted to the heavens. Every breath waited. And then, nothing. The sky remained empty. No cloud, no rumble, no drop. People began to shift, their hopes slipping away once more. But Diego did not lower his hands. He kept them raised, his face tilted upward. His eyes closed, whispering words too soft for anyone to hear. And then it happened. Breeze. Small at first, then stronger. A coolness in the air. A scent. Sharp, unmistakable. The scent of rain. The villagers lifted their heads. Gasps broke out. Above them, dark clouds gathered as if out of nowhere, rolling heavy and full. And then thunder. Deep, powerful, like the earth itself speaking. The first drop fell on Diego's forehead. Then another on Elena's cheek. And then, all at once, the heavens opened. Rain poured down. It drenched their clothes, their hair, their faces. Children shrieked with joy, running barefoot through puddles. Women lifted their skirts and laughed. Men raised their arms to the sky, shouting thanks. The people of San Jacinto wept. Not from sorrow, but from relief, from gratitude, from something like awe. And in the middle of it all, Diego stood still, water streaming down his face. His eyes closed. His lips moving in silent prayer. From that day everything changed. The villagers no longer whispered curse when Diego passed. They no longer turned their backs. Instead they greeted him. They thanked him. Some even asked him to bless their children with a touch, a smile, a simple word. Elena watched it all with tears she could not stop. Her boy, the boy they had cast out, mocked, stoned, shunned, was now the boy they sought out, the boy they honored. And Rafael, quiet, steady Rafael, would place a hand on Diego's shoulder and say softly, "You see, hijo. Sometimes the world needs time to catch up to the truth." Years later, when people spoke of the great drought, they always told the story of the rain. But more than that, they told the story of the boy who prayed, the boy with the strange eyes and the streak of silver hair. And in time they stopped calling him different. They started calling him something else. Blessing. Son of San Jacinto. Elena never forgot the pain, the long nights of tears, the years of being cast out. But when she saw her son walking freely through the plaza, children running to him, old men tipping their hats to him, she knew it had all been worth it. For sometimes, my friends, what the world rejects, heaven remembers. And when heaven remembers, even the hardest hearts can change.